So for this video, we're going to look at doing a sample for a camisole neckline with bust gathers and an empire line. So here I've got two templates for the patterns. Here you can see I've manipulated out the bust dart into a French dart, and after doing that I've redrawn the neckline. I've also shaped the empire line here slightly so that it is a right angle where it meets the side seam. And for the next piece, which is what we're going to attach this to once we've done it, is what you might have if you had a contoured waist or something like that. So for this one, I've manipulated out the waist dart, and again it reflects that shaped empire line at the side seam where it's a right angle. If you didn't want to have a fitted waist, what you do, you still have to get rid of this width from the dart. You could remove the width, whatever it was here, just off the side seam. So looking at these two templates, a couple of things to point out. Of course, we've got our centre fronts, side seams, a French dart which has been manipulated into gathers, and we show that by having this squiggly line which starts and finishes with like a bracket. That line is also reflected using notches. So this area is where the gathering will appear once you've finished. Because I've got two pattern pieces, two template pieces, I've labelled them A and B. These notches are reflected in the bottom piece, the contoured waist section. So this area will get gathered to fit into this area here. So you can see this is slightly bigger, and that will fit in here. That's up to you how big you want this section. You might only want it small, you might want a real tight area of gathers. This one's going to be a looser area of gathers. So here we need to cut two. Again, we're going to use the second piece as a facing, and here we're just going to have the one piece. So I'll do that now. Best way to do that, I've got my fabric. I know I need two for the piece A, so I'm going to fold up my fabric, ensuring I know where the grain line is. So we've got a selvage here. So it's either the grain line's either going to have to be perpendicular to the selvage or parallel with this straight edge, which at the moment it is both. I'm just going to move that up a little bit. Now I've cut this so it's straight, so I'm not going to worry about tracing that section. I'm just going to line up my centre front with that straight edge and trace around the rest of the template. Making sure I mark those notches for the gathers. One other thing I didn't point out is you'll see with this French dart, it's been curved off. It's not angular, it's been curved off. Alright, so I've got that part traced around. And then I can move this piece up and just trace around one single layer because I only need one. So again, I'm going to make sure my grain line is parallel with that straight cut edge. Mark my notches. So there are my two pieces. What I'm going to do, I'm going to pin this one together so my fabric doesn't move when I'm cutting, and I'll cut them out. So what we're going to do first is we're going to do the gathering stitch. So for the gathering stitch, should be on straight stitch, 0 and the longest length, which is 4. Now on our pattern pieces, we have two fronts because one's going to face the other. Now they should be mirror images like this because they will end up facing each other like that. Now we have these two notches on the empire line. Now just a reminder, empire line is 6 centimeters above the waistline. So what we need to do is our gathering stitch between these two notches, and then we use the stitch to gather so that they then fit the bottom piece in between these two notches. So to do the gathering stitch, we've got it set straight stitch in the longest length. We need long tails, and we do 2 stitch lines that should sit, once finished, in the middle of, or the seam, when you create the seam, should sit in the middle of the 2 stitch lines. Probably doesn't make much sense at the moment, but it will when we do it. So the first stitch line I'm going to do lining up the edge with this part here. And what we do is we need long tails. Where are my tails? We need to leave them nice and long, and we don't reverse. So I'm going to stitch a real narrow stitch line in between the 2 notches. Once I get to the last notch, I'm going to pull it out. So again, I have nice long tails. Then I'm going to do another stitch line, my second gathering stitch line, a foot's width from the first stitch line. Just making sure you start at the notch. And finish at the next notch. Again, nice long tails. So this is our gathering stitch line. So our 1 centimeter seam allowance stitch line should sit in the middle of these 2 gathering stitch lines. So now what we're going to do is we're going to pull just the top 2 threads. Might have to get rid of the bottom 2 if they're getting tangled up. So grab the top 2, and we're going to pull the fabric along them. So again, we've got to do it to the point where these notches line up. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to stop on that side. I'm going to put a pin in. And I'm going to grab those threads all together. And I'm going to wind them around that pin. And that's going to act as an anchor for me. Then I can repeat the step from the other side. So just picking up the top 2 threads and moving the fabric along. Now at this stage, I need to double check to see if my notches from my gathered piece are going to match my bottom piece. Yep, you can see that they match there. Oops, can you see that? Alright, so I'm going to pop another pin in and in a figure 8, wrap the loose ends around that pin. Now if you wanted tighter gathers, what you would do is you would make your area for gathering here, this would be closer together. So what I'm going to do now is just evenly distribute my gathers. Make sure the notches still match. Actually, a little bit off. Need to do this one a little bit tighter. Hope you can't hear that singing in the background. Alright, it's a little bit tighter. And then wind that up. Might just spread out those gathers slightly. Alright, so I'm happy with that. It fits between those notches, line up. Now I need to attach this to that. Now you have to make sure you've got your center fronts in the right area. You can always go back and check your pattern piece, but I should be able to check just by placing this one here and knowing that these notches here line up. So back to the machine, make sure you go back to 2.5 for your stitch length. And you can stitch along the bottom of your empire line using the 1 centimeter line as a guide. I'm just going to line up the end there, and then I'm going to pinch together where my notches should meet. Just readjust that underneath and then keep stitching. Now I'm coming up to my first pin. I'm going to use the hand wheel to go over that. Now those 2 stitch lines, their role is to hold your gathers in place. So you can stitch between the 2 stitch lines. Just double check that your notches are lining up, which they are. And before you get to the pin, use your hand wheel to go over it and then finish your stitch line for the empire line. Okay, so having a look at that, I can take my pins out. Pulling that straight. So that there is my bust gathers. So what you need to do is repeat it on the other piece, which you should have notched here and here. So you'll need to put in your gather line, stitch lines there. And don't worry about gathering them yet, just leave them.